This third section of the videotape deals with how to answer 4 very specific questions that are very difficult if you haven't prepared ahead of time. For candidates who do prepare for them, they come across very well and they get the jobs. For candidates who don't prepare ahead of time and handle them well, they're not going to be offered the job. So let's look at these 4 specific, difficult questions one at a time. The first question is, why do you think you're a good candidate for the job? This question might also be phrased, why do you think I should hire you? Don't be offended if they ask you that question. It's a legitimate question. What they're really saying is, why do you think that you fit the job? And so take this as a marvelous opportunity to explain just that you do fit the job. And the way you do that is to go back and you use that 5 to 10 minute explanation that you developed for yourself earlier and which you used to answer the broad brush question. That's what you wrote on pages 61 and 62 in your workbook. You use that same information, but you use it in a shortened version. What you do now is you answer in about a minute to a minute and a half by using specific examples from your past which show that you fit the job requirements that this recruiter is looking for. And by doing that, the recruiter is going to say, this person is an excellent candidate. Let's watch an example of a candidate for a nurse's position as she effectively answers this question. Pay particular attention to how she mentions her skills and her accomplishments in the past and how she then ties them into the needs of this current job.
Why do you feel you're the candidate we should hire for the position of general nurse at this clinic?
I believe I would be an excellent choice for this position for a number of reasons. My 6 years' experience working for 2 doctors in a general practice office gave me excellent preparation for this kind of a job. It was located in the suburbs of a large city, so we saw a wide range of cases and ages of patients. I've handled everything from drug OD emergencies to burns, serious cuts, broken bones. I've even helped one of the doctors deliver a baby right in our own office. Another strength I would bring to this position is that I've kept myself very well informed with the latest nursing procedures and techniques through reading nursing journals and attending classes when offered. A third reason I feel I am a good candidate for this position is my experience in administering prescribed medications and treatments that are in line with the latest nursing techniques. Another reason is my skill in understanding and preparing equipment, sterilizing instruments and supplies, and aiding the doctors during procedures and examinations. One other important reason is that I truly feel compassion for other people. Plus, I get along well with both my patients and the other staff members. These qualities I feel are really important for a job of this kind.
The woman we saw interviewing for the nurse's position answered the question, why do you think you're a good candidate for this job? Very effectively by using the points that we've suggested. And you can do the same thing if you'll follow the points that we suggest and practice. The second difficult, specific question, which you almost always get asked in interviews, is, what are your strengths and your weaknesses? Another way that recruiters ask this question is, what do you think some of the easiest and most difficult parts of the job will be for you? When you get this question, it's best to break it down into 2 parts. So we'll discuss the what are your strengths part first, and then we'll come back and discuss the what are your weaknesses. If you can, always start by discussing your strengths first. Answering your strengths question should be based on 3 things. 1, what the job needs, meaning the skills, background experiences, and abilities which the job requires. 2, your skills, experience, and accomplishments which fit the needs of the job. And 3, honesty with what you say. When you do answer this question, the way to effectively handle it is to pick 3 or 4 examples from your past which show that you do have the strengths which the job requires. That's the most effective, powerful way to answer this question. Let's now watch an example of a candidate for a high school math teacher's position as he very effectively handles this question, what are your strengths?
One of the questions interviewers like to ask candidates is, what are your weaknesses and strengths? I like to ask that question too. We all have weaknesses and strengths that are job-related. We have an open position in our high school for a math teacher, as you know. I'd like you to respond to that question. What are your strengths and weaknesses for that position?
One of my areas of real strength is that I've been a high school math teacher for over 12 years now. I know how to teach in such a way that the students enjoy the class while learning math. Both are important to me. My style of being strict yet fair is also a strength, since classroom discipline must be maintained for the best learning to take place. My having been voted the Teacher of the Year by both faculty and students 3 of the last 5 years also demonstrates my strength in effectively working with teenagers and other teachers. For the last 7 years, I've taught the Advanced Honors Calculus class, and they've taken top honors in both district and state math competitions. Another strength that I would bring to this position is that I work well with school administration and with the parents of students. I believe both these are very important in order to be an excellent teacher. The best evidence of my strengths in this area are the letters of recommendation and a newspaper article about me, which I will be happy to share with you.
This candidate did a good job of showing that he had strengths which were job-related by using examples from his past which tied right in to the job description. He also did it in about a minute, which is an excellent time for an answer. Once you've answered the strengths part of the question, what are your strengths and your weaknesses, then the trickier part comes, and that's what are your weaknesses and how do you answer that? What I've done is spent quite a bit of time on audio tape, the end of 5, Side A, and 5B, giving you specific instructions, examples, and how to handle this tricky question effectively in interviews. Also in your workbook on pages 19, 25, and especially page 69, you'll find additional helpful information to handle this question of what are your weaknesses. The 2 most important things to remember when answering the weaknesses part of this question are, first, you do not have to tell everything about yourself, your personal life, your fears, and personal weaknesses. And second, if you are pressed to come up with several items, then focus on 1 or 2 relatively unimportant job-related weaknesses. But in any case, never focus on any major job-related skills or background experiences which you don't have and which the job requires, or you just won't get the job. Let's watch the school teacher as he effectively answers the second half of this question, what are your strengths and your weaknesses?
As for my weaknesses, one of the things I recognize is that coming into a new school district, I would not know any of the staff or administration, which could be a little more difficult initially, but it wouldn't be a continuing problem once I got to know everyone better. Also, a weakness might be my not knowing all of the school district's policies and procedures as well as I should. But I would spend the time necessary to quickly learn them so that it wouldn't be a problem at some point in the future.
Those are weaknesses that anyone would have coming into this job. What I'd like you to do is respond more specifically to weaknesses that you have relevant to this job position.
I really feel very confident with my skills, my level of experience, and my style, but I'm sure there are areas where I could improve more. For example, I'm very current with the math curriculum textbooks offered by both Addison Wesley and Holt Publishers. I'm not as familiar right now with textbooks from Houghton Mifflin Publishers. So if you're using their curriculum, that is an area where I would have to do some work. But there really aren't any weaknesses which would prevent me from being very successful in this position.
Didn't this candidate for the high school math teaching position handle it professionally? You can do the same thing if you'll follow the steps that we've outlined, even with a difficult question such as, what are your weaknesses? Let's move on now to the third difficult and specific question which you almost always are asked in interviews, and that is, why did you leave your last job and the job or jobs before that? Like the other questions, we've spent quite a bit of time already talking about this. on the audio tapes and in the workbook, but we'd like to show you examples now of how to handle it effectively. The most important thing in answering this question of why did you leave your last job is to be very honest with what you say, but also never say that you were fired. Companies today expect people to change, expect people to move from company to company, from job to job. And in fact, it's often perceived as a positive rather than a negative. My experience as I've been involved in the interviewing of thousands of people is that it's not just what you say in answering this question that's important, but it's how you say it also. If you come across sort of negatively bad-mouthing your former boss or your former company, if you're apologetic in what you say, or if you go on and on with your explanation, that never looks good. What you should do is be brief, specific and clear, and then you should go on to other things. You should be positive and look at this as this was an opportunity for me to move to another company, gain additional experience, further prepare myself for this job that I'm now interviewing for. That kind of a positive, short answer is the most powerful and the right way to answer this question. Let's watch a candidate as she now answers this question very effectively as she interviews for a store manager's position.
You've worked for 4 good companies in the past 15 years. Please explain why you left your former employers and why you're now interested in making yet another change to join our company.
I began my sales career with the Allied Clothing Company upon my graduation from UCLA, and this was a valuable experience obtaining a foundation in retail sales. And I was promoted twice during this period of time, and the only reason I left them was that I was offered an opportunity with the Best Products company, and they offered me the position of sales supervisor, and then I was later promoted to sales manager. They went through a merger with the XYZ retail company, and at that time the new management offered me a position in their retail office as merchandising and inventory control manager. This was an interesting, challenging time in my career, a good time. I was learning a great deal, but also a difficult time because the company was having severe financial difficulties. And they did go into Chapter 11 and were required to reduce their sales force dramatically. And the store where I was working was closed and we were all laid off. During the next 5 months, I had the very interesting experience of interviewing with a number of very fine companies and then was offered the position of sales or store manager at the firm where I presently am working. And that was just about 4 years ago, and I have enjoyed that position immensely. I feel that I have learned and grown a great deal, particularly during the first 2 years. However, our product line is small, and our opportunities for expansion are limited. And therefore, I feel that I am ready now to broaden my horizons and to use this valuable experience that I have already had. And as I have looked at your company with its rapid national expansion, I'm very interested in using my abilities that I have developed now in the position of store manager in a large, diverse store. And that is why I'm very interested in your company.
This candidate for the store manager's position handled the question of why did you leave your former companies very effectively? And she did it in less than a minute and a half, which is excellent when you have to explain leaving several previous companies. She was able to do that by following the instructions and the outline of how to handle this that we had presented. And you can do the same by following this information. The next difficult, specific question is, tell me about your salary requirements. Or they may also say, what salary did you earn at your last job, or where you're now working, and what would you like to earn in this job? This question is a good and a valid question to ask early on in the interviewing process, and it's something that both you and the interviewing company want to make sure that you do cover early on, but you always wait to have them ask it first. The reason this is so important is because you want to make sure that they're willing to pay roughly what you're interested in receiving. And they want to make sure that you're willing to work for roughly what they're willing to pay. That's why this question is asked typically in the first or in the second interview. When you're asked this question, there are some very specific things you should and shouldn't do, and we've gone over those in the workbook, especially pages 13, 19, 24, 71, and 72. Also, audio tape 5B gives you very specific help in this area. To further help you, let's look at a candidate who is interviewing for a biochemist's position as she answers this question of, what are your salary requirements? Don't let the amount of her salary or her salary range bother you, because whether it's more or less than what you're interested in really doesn't matter. What's important is that she uses the recommendations that we make very effectively in answering this question. So let's watch this example now.
Before we get too far along in this interviewing process, we should make sure that your salary expectations and ours are reasonably similar. What are you earning at your present job? And what would you expect to be making if you were offered this position with our firm?
My current salary is $42,500. That has been in effect since my last performance review a year ago. Our company has just completed our annual reviews again, and the expectation is that our salaries will be increased in the coming weeks. If I were to leave my company and join another firm, I would like my salary to be in the upper 40s to low 50s.
This candidate did a good job of answering the question, what are your salary requirements? It was appropriate for her to mention that she recently had had an appraisal review, because that is good information to share with the company thinking of hiring her, and they need to know that if they're trying to decide what is the appropriate amount to offer this candidate. Also, she used a range of salary rather than a specific amount, and that's appropriate also. The survey that we recently conducted to the 760 corporations, we asked them, would you prefer that candidates give you a range of salary or give you a specific number that they'd like? Overwhelmingly, those corporations said, we would like a range of salary. That gives us and the candidate more flexibility. So make sure that you mention a range of salary when you are asked this question. The real secret to answering this question appropriately is to use page 71 from your workbook to help you to find out what is the company going to offer. Also, look at your current salary and look at your background and your strengths. That information together will help you to decide what is the appropriate range that you should mention. You've now seen 10 examples. 8 of the examples showed you things you should do and how to be effective in an interview. And 2 examples showed you things you shouldn't do and things to avoid. May I suggest that you review this videotape again and again before you interview in order to help prepare yourself. Your next step in preparing to interview like a pro and get the job you want is to go back to audio tape 6A and pages 73 through 101 in the workbook. There, you'll learn how to ask questions in the interview and what you shouldn't ask. You'll learn how to handle subsequent interviews. Also, how to write cover letters and thank you letters. And what about negotiating the job offer? And you'll learn how to handle the negotiating of salaries and benefits. And there is the final super secret to helping you to get the job that you want. I'm anxious to hear your success story as you complete these materials and follow the steps that I've outlined. I know that you can do it, and wish you the very best of success in that effort.